Welcome to the webinar of the FSPI PSI Benefit Risk Group. I hope you all had a good experience joining this call. I already see 35 attendees on the call. I think we have a couple of more people registers, but in the as we want to use the time in the best way, I will get started directly now. So, just to introduce myself, I'm Alexander Schacht. I'm the chair of the FSPI and PSI Special Interest Group on Benefit Risk. We are an organization of statisticians across different pharma organizations and academia to work on benefit risk and promote this topic, especially within statisticians in Europe. We also work closely together with our QSPI counterpart in the US. And I'm very happy that today we have Connie and Rachel from the IMI Prefer project, a project that is very central to moving the benefit risk topic further. And I'm very happy that we have these two key people here. So now I want to hand over to one of the members of the Special Interest Group from Novartis, Pritipa. Please move forward.
Great, thank you very much, Alexander. And to echo Alexander, it is really our pleasure to introduce to you today Connie Berlin and Rachel Di Santano Stefano. It's a bit of an honor to have both of these speakers here today to share with us their presentation on patient preferences and benefit risk assessments during the drug life cycle. So I'd first like to introduce Connie Berlin. Connie leads the Quantitative Safety and Epidemiology group here at Novartis. She holds a degree in mathematics from the University of Rostock in Germany. And we are quite pleased that she's here because she's also got more than 25 years of experience within our pharmaceutical industry. Along with this, she shares with us a profound knowledge of quantitative methodology applied to clinical trials data, observational data, spontaneous reports, and also to extend to respond to safety and benefit risk questions during drug development and post-approval. In addition to all of this, Connie is also a member of our internal company medical safety review board, and she's also on our real-world evidence leadership team. I'd also like to share with you that Rachel, we're also very pleased to have her here as well. Rachel is the Director for Benefit Risk and Epidemiology at Janssen Research and Development. She has nearly 25 years of pharmaceutical research experience across the quantitative disciplines of epidemiology, biostatistics, and health outcomes. And she's currently responsible for guiding clinical teams in structured benefit risk assessments, including the use of both qualitative and quantitative methods. She received her PhD in health policy and her master's in biostatistics at the University of North Carolina Gilling School of Global Public Health. So I'd like to extend a warm welcome to both Connie and Rachel, and I'd like to hand over to Rachel as our first speaker. Thank you both very much.
Thank you for inviting us today, and we're very excited to talk to you about Prefer. And I wanted to give a little bit of background, although this group seems to be a specialized group within benefit risk, about the context of where we are and what our preference is. So if you haven't heard about the IMI initiative, it's actually a series of initiatives, and it's a large public-private partnership to try to speed medicines development and develop better and safer medicines. There's a variety of initiatives that you might have heard under this. IMI Protect is one that preceded Prefer. And there's lots of budget put behind this, and it's a partnership between the EU and European pharma industry. So Prefer came about because of an unmet need in terms of how patients' perspectives are taken into account, specifically with benefits and risks when making decisions. And so Prefer aims to look at this further in terms of taking the patient perspective into account and looking at how to apply preference methods at all stages during the life cycle. Connie's going to talk much more in detail about Prefer, but that's just the unmet need. Of course, the goal in the end is to establish recommendations on the application of preference studies across a wide variety of spaces, and it's intended to, so PREFER work is intended to inform on what's going to be in the guidance. So the broader context also is this huge growth of patient-centeredness and patient-focused drug development. And I'm listing organizations here that are also talking about the application of preference studies. Notably, the FDA and EMA are taking part, and there are various guidance documents, and there are some references in the back about some work that's been done. Trade organizations, of course, are also involved in this and talking about patient preference studies and having a hand in various initiatives, as well as the public-private partnerships that we mentioned, PREFER, of course, being one of them. The MDIC has also laid the groundwork for this. If folks haven't heard of the MDIC, they laid the groundwork for preferences and have a catalog as well that's in the references. So finally, of course, patient groups are very involved in this as well because of the patient voice. So what are preferences? So, sorry about this. Let me see if I can mute. So preferences are measures of the relative importance. They're measures, of course, of the relative importance of benefits, harms, and other characteristics such as a dosing schedule, an injectable versus a pill, and so on. And these measures of relative importance tell us they're the basis for which patients make particular treatment choices. So I'm going to give you some examples, and I'm assuming that folks on the phone might have heard of this or be in various stages of hearing of this, but I think these examples will lay the groundwork for understanding the basics. So there are three types of patient preference information, and these tell us these attributes that we look at, the benefits, risks, and other characteristics. We can tell what matters, we can look at the relative importance and how much it matters, and we can look at what trade-offs people are willing to make between the benefits and harms. And these methods vary from qualitative to quantitative. And of course, as you get into the relative importance and the trade-offs, the methods get more quantitative. As for example, a discrete choice analysis or conjoint analysis. So this is an example of potential drugs. And if you look in the treatments A through E, they provide you a certain level of risk of infection and a certain level of reduction in days hospitalized. So this is one benefit and risk, and this is a very simple problem. And if you look, device C is superior on both the benefit and the risk. And so you don't really need a preference study necessarily. There's a clear winner, if you will, in terms of the drug that provides the best benefit and the least amount of risk. So preference information isn't needed, and in a lot of cases preference information isn't necessarily needed, but I'm going to show you an example of where it will be important. So now which treatment is best? If you look, you can see that treatment A is superior to D and E because it provides lower risk and more efficacy, and treatment C is superior to B. But which do you choose, A or C? So in this case, preference information is needed to choose between them. It depends on whether or not you are more interested in avoiding infection or maximizing your efficacy benefit. So this is what we might refer to as a preference-sensitive decision. So CDRH within the FDA has done a pilot study on preferences. And if you've been to a conference on preferences, you might have seen this example already, but it's a good one. So in terms of the weight loss devices available, there's diet and exercise on the one end, and relatively speaking, it's low weight loss and lower on the risk spectrum. On the other end of the scale, you have gastric banding and other procedures which are intense in terms of being a surgical procedure, and they have a lot more risks associated with them compared to diet and exercise, but they also have a bigger reward in terms of more weight loss. So the preference pilot that the CDRH conducted was looking at a potential for a new device that fell somewhere between diet and exercise and the surgical options that were there. And again, it's preference sensitive in that if you have all of these choices, you need to decide what benefits and risks are acceptable to you on this spectrum. So this is an example of a choice question that was developed in the survey. And if you are unfamiliar with this, I want to give you a little bit of guidance on this. Choice tasks typically have the different attributes or features, as it's called on the left column. And as you can see here, they look at weight loss, how long it lasts, the side effects, your chance of dying from getting the device. And patients are given the option of picking device A or device B. And by giving a series of these and setting up an efficient design over a large sample, you can cover the space of interest in terms of all the ranges of benefits and risks for device A and device B. And yeah, this one included the 8 features. Different patients were given a certain number of these, and then with the analysis, you can tell the relative preferences. This has been published, if you see here, by Martin Ho and colleagues at CDRH in 2015. So this is what the choice tasks look like. This schematic gives us mean preference weights. Now I should tell you these are standardized so that they're on a common scale just by taking the model parameter estimates and standardizing them, but it allows us to do some relative comparisons. So first, what you need to know about this is that better outcomes have higher weights. So you see weight loss is above 0, and the higher you are on this scale, it's a better outcome. The worst outcomes have lower weights. So you see there, with regard to mortality risk, there are lower weights associated with those. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about how to interpret this further. Over the range tested, mortality risk, weight loss, and weight loss duration are the most important attributes, and you can tell that with regard to the slope of the line or the distance shown there. And similarly, you can say something about relative importance. If you look at the side effects, that's the least important attribute. You can also tell that these have a pattern that you might expect, that as the weight loss increases, the score increases to the positive, and similarly as the risk of death and other things increase for side effects, the scores go down. But in this case, it was interesting that there's no difference between the diet restrictions of waiting 4 hours or eating small portions of a quarter of a cup, but people really didn't like the idea of not eating sweets or hard to digest foods. So because we have this on a common metric, you can look and see how many units of one event, a benefit, are people would be willing to trade for a unit of risk. And so that's part of the reason for this standardization. You can say something about the relative measures. Although I'm not going to talk about it here, there is information, I believe, in the paper about maximum acceptable risk of weight loss, maximum acceptable risk for mortality relative to the amount of weight loss that might be given. So there's some discussion of maximum acceptable risk in the paper. So the FDA did actually use this information when they were evaluating the Maestro neuromodulator device. So the device did not meet the co-primary endpoints. It was close. I don't remember the specifics of this, but it is available. But the agency used this information in the sense that they found that obese patients were willing to take on more risks in exchange for the weight loss. So there was a group of patients that they could see benefiting from this device, and they were willing to take on the risks. So this is the first case where we see that based on CDRH's pilot, they incorporated patient preferences into the decision making and felt that there was a group of patients that could benefit from the obesity device despite not quite hitting its co-primary endpoint for weight loss. There are a lot of open questions, and recently there was a small commentary posted, I think, in pharmacoeconomics about preference studies. If we're going to start making accounting for patient preferences in regulatory decision-making, there's a lot we need to know and that we don't know and we need to learn. Which methods, which patients, there's a lot of this debate, particularly in the health technology space, about whether it's patients or a more general population, for example. Can patients do it? And so forth. So there are a lot of open questions, and this is where PREFER comes into play, and we're going to try to answer some of these questions as patient preferences are taken into account for regulatory decision making. So with that, I will turn it over to Connie, who is going to talk more about PREFER. Okay?
Thanks.
Hello.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Just
Alexander,
as
do you
a
want to
kind
say
of comment in the middle, if you have any, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and we will go to them at the end.
Okay, thanks, Alexander. And Rachel, I guess you can show the next slide. So as Rachel has said already, this project has been initiated because there is a lack of understanding of how patient perspectives on benefits and risks can best inform decision making. And the goal of the IMI Prefer project is to develop recommendations which are expert and evidence-based, and really aim to guide industry, regulatory authorities, and HTA bodies and reimbursement agencies on how patient preferences can be assessed and used to inform medical product decision making. It is a 5-year project. We have kicked that off in October 2016, and it will finish in 2021. And as Rachel also explained what an IMI project is, so here on this slide you see all the partners of the project. It's actually 33 public and industry partners. The industry partners have contribute to this project with in-kind contributions, means really resources of a value of 6 million euro. And that is then also the amount which the European Commission has funded this project. So that is really the money which the public partners get. And what you get with the whole consortium, which has then actually more than 100 people, is a lot of expertise in statistics and patient preference methodology already, in certainly regulatory decision making, also HTA and reimbursement decision making. You have expertise in how to run clinical trials or observational studies, project management, communication, and that all is certainly of absolutely importance to run the project. But since we want to develop guidances, recommendations for decision makers, not only in industry, but also regulators and HTA bodies and reimbursement agencies, it needs stakeholder advice. And if you go to the next slide, then you see that we have also HTA and payers involved and regulators. And even more important probably is that we talk here about patient preference studies. So one of the really important stakeholders is the patients. And we have already, maybe you can just go back again. We have already patients, also one HTA body in our consortium, but the way we have organized to get more expertise really and concentrated advice from all the stakeholder groups is that we have stakeholder advisory boards where we have the patients in, then one for HTA and payers and one for regulators. And we have coordinators who work with us in the steering committee so that we have a good collaboration with all of these groups. Now we can go to the next. because certainly the science is also really important here. And as I think most of the IMI projects have scientific advisory boards. We have one here, and you see who is in our scientific advisory board. You might know the one or the other of them. John Bridge from Johns Hopkins Hospital, for instance, Brett Hauber from RTI, Laura Lee Johnson from FDA, and also Anne Stegelbaut from the Leiden University. So that gives us also direct input in addition to the expertise we have in the consortium. And what Rachel also mentioned already before is that there are many initiatives about patient preferences running. So we really don't want to miss the broader perspective outside of the consortium, why we have another collaboration built, and this is together with the International Academy of Health Preference Research. So we really try to get our project connected to scientists and to stakeholders as much as we can, certainly for two major reasons. The one is that we have enough expertise and knowledge for our project, and then that we get our recommendations at the end really well accepted, so that the implementation works also well. Next slide. So now, how do we really achieve Prefer's goal of developing the science and the recommendations for patient preference elicitation? So we have organized the project in a way that we have 4 work packages. The first one is the project management, dissemination and communication work package. The second one is all about the methodological questions, including to assess stakeholder needs, recommend preference methods and criteria for case studies. Then we have one per work package 3 about the design and execution and evaluation of the case studies, and that will then turn into work package 4 to develop the recommendations. The next slide shows the major 32 tasks which we have defined at the very beginning. So we had a very intense project planning, what we want to do and how we do this. And what we especially would like to show with that slide is that certainly the tasks and what we do, but also that there is a lot of interaction between all the 4 work packages to make sure that we do not only go subsequent in tasks here, but really have parallel working on different tasks at the same time, and a very intense exchange of information and knowledge and science we work out during the project. If you go to the next slide, and from now I describe a little bit more in detail what we do in these work packages. So work package 1 is all about project coordination, management, contractual obligations. It's the one work package which has really established all the links with our patients, the regulators, the HTA advisory groups. We have written a communication plan because it's very important that we certainly organize what we communicate out of the project, when we communicate, when we really are able to disseminate results, who is doing that. And this webinar, for instance, is certainly one of the activities. And then work package 1 supports very much the other 3 work packages. Work package 2, as I said, is about the methodology in this project, and there are 2 major parts. The one is to determine the desires, expectations, concerns, and requirements that our key stakeholders have on the collection and use of patient preferences in the medicinal product life cycle. It also includes really the stages of the life cycle when decisions are made. And then the second part is about providing recommendations from the methods work package to the work package 3 about the case studies. And then finally to work package 4 on developing the recommendations for patient preference elicitation. And that work package works very closely together with, as I said already, with work package 3 and 4, but also then with all the stakeholders and internal and external scientists. Yeah, you have seen that slide already, but again, it shows you a number of questions which we are aware of already, I mean, at the start of the project. But what we want to make sure is that all our stakeholders now can really express what their questions are. And next slide shows you who our stakeholders are. So it's in the third part really industry, regulatory authorities, HTA bodies, reimbursement agencies as the main decision makers. And then, because it is about patient preference elicitation, patients, caregivers, and clinicians. And what we ask them is what they like, what they expect, what they are worried about, what they really must have for patient preference studies and decision making, and when and how they decide. And the way we have organized it is now shown on the next slides. So we started actually already at our kickoff meeting in October last year, where we certainly had invited the whole consortium and already our stakeholders. And we used that opportunity to run exploratory interviews to get first input from them. And that helped us already to prepare literature review, which was the second step. And this is what the work package 2 different task teams have done already. And it helped to design the semi-structured interviews which are currently running. And this is what our work package 2 task leaders do together with the patient organization and patients and all the stakeholders. We have selected some countries which you see listed here. So it's Italy, Romania, Sweden, UK, France, Germany, Netherlands, and United States, from where we select interviewees. And then once this is done, we go to the last step, and these are focus group discussions. So it's the same stakeholders, now from Italy, Romania, Sweden, and UK. And it's small interactive group discussions with about 6 to 10 people. And we will also use then certainly the opportunity of do discussions together with the steering committee and our stakeholder advisory groups and the scientific advisory board, because we have really very experienced people in these groups, and also to make sure that everybody supports the final conclusions and recommendations from these discussions. And that certainly also includes the broader network of scientists like the IHPR, which was this International Academy of Health Preference Research. So once we have done these focus group and other discussions about the desires and expectations and needs, we do the methodological part, and I must correct myself already because some of these parts have been done already. So this is now to identify a set of candidate methodologies, and both preference and also educational, psychological, because it's certainly also of importance how you design your patient preference questionnaire, how many questions you ask, how you ask these questions, and what tools you might use for these studies. So that goes in here as well. And then this whole task will deliver criteria which we use in our case studies. And here I can also mention already that Rachel was very much involved in the report about the methods, and that is finished. And she is the co-lead for one of the next tasks, which then identifies out of all the interviews we have done and the methodological part, what are the most important criteria which we have to use in our case studies. Then we go to the case study work package. This has as an objective or overall objective to develop the research template for case studies. And these are then not only templates which are of importance for our own case studies, but we always want to work out something which we can put into our recommendations later. And that is the feedback which we have heard already in first discussions with our regulators, for instance, that it's very important for them to understand which methods we really recommend to them, but also how to run the studies, what templates should be used, so that we also simplify the work of their regulatory reviewers, for instance. Then we would translate questions and ideas from work package 2 into public and industry case study protocols. So we have already fixed that we will run public studies in therapeutic areas like rheumatoid arthritis, cancer, and neuromuscular disorders. And we have experts in these areas in our consortium. And what we do then in addition is we identify historical case studies from companies. So we know that some companies have run patient preference studies already in the past. So once we have identified the criteria which are important for this project, we will also check if there are industry studies already available which would qualify for this project and which would then contribute also as another contribution from the companies to this project. Maybe more important will be also prospective studies, and we are on our way also to prepare this so that industry partners can also run prospective studies during the course of this project and contribute these studies to the project. What is then very important that we not only review the results from each of the single studies, but also do cross case study assessments, and that is part of the work package 3 tasks. And then finally, the output of this task and work package is develop results and conclusions which are ready for translation into recommendations in work package 4. The next slide shows you again a little bit the interaction between work package 2 and work package 3. What is really important here that we define both research questions, medical research questions for the case studies, then identify what methods are relevant to investigate these research studies, and then what specific criteria, what specific questions out of the many you have seen before should be used to assess the case studies. Okay, I think I talked about this already, so we can go to the next slide. Work package 4. The very first step we have taken already is to define the scope of recommendations. It was very important for us to identify what are how the recommendations probably should look like at the very end. So we have developed somehow like a skeleton of a table of content. And that will be now further developed while we go through this project. Another task for this work package is to develop operational requirements and best practices for conducting the case studies. And then we always, while we go through the project, we create and test our draft recommendations, which means we talk to all the stakeholders and see where we are aligned and where we maybe also need more discussions. And at the end, we refine and finalize the recommendations. And at the end, I would like to also acknowledge the work Bennett Levitin has done. He is one of our work package 2 co-leads from Janssen, and he has generated already a lot of these slides which Rachel and I present here today. And with that, I'm at the end, and I hope that you could hear me. Yeah, maybe that's Alexander, could you maybe give me a feedback whether you can hear me, because I hear a beep?
Yes.
Okay.
I
Good.
could hear you very well.
Okay.
Thanks.
Very good. Then maybe one last remark. We see here as under further reading the MDIC framework and FDA CDRH final patient preference guidance. And that is a document which I really recommend to everybody who is interested in that topic. I think we called it a little bit like a Bible for our project, because this contains a lot of pre-work which has been done on that topic on the US side, and which we now can really use in the PREFER project, which the IMI project are usually certainly European projects, but with a globalization at the end, it's indeed really a very global project. Okay.
Thanks a lot.
That, I think, was our presentation.
Thanks a lot, Anja and Rachel. That was a very, very good overview about the project, the different the problems that you are tackling, and the bold goals that I very much hope you will reach on these kind of things. I know that there's lots of people on the call that have interest in benefit risk and that may have already some worked on similar projects or benefit risk projects in the past. So as we have no questions in the chat yet, I hope we will get some further. Maybe I can first ask for all of us is in terms of the IMI preferred project that is running now and it's still running for a couple of years. So if people would be interested to join this project or that would like to help move forward this project in other ways, how would that work?
So first, we have, I think, 16 industry partners in that project. So it's probably quite likely that the one or the other works in such one of the companies, and you see that on slide 21. So that, I think, is the most easiest way to join activities. You would just need to reach out to either your IMI office, if there is one in your company, or you can contact me and I forward your email to our project manager. To just tell you, if you really don't know who in your company is working on that IMI project, then I think we can help you finding out and you can reach out to them. And then you can join, we can provide you information and you probably can join one of the task groups who are still working. It's a bit more complicated with other companies who have not joined that consortium, because here we would really need to decide whether it's possible or not.
Okay, thanks a lot. That was very good. In terms of other help, if people would like to support this project and in terms of giving input into the project, resources, studies, anything that would be interesting for the project, or if people would like to have this project being presented about and at local conferences and stuff like that, how would that work?
Alexander, I must admit I lost the connections. Could you just briefly repeat your question, because I couldn't hear it?
Okay, if you are if you would like to support the IMI project in terms of the communication and help with getting someone from the IMI project speak about it at conferences or other opportunities, how would that work?
Either you reach out to me, for instance, or to, I think you can also go via our webpage. We have the Prefer project on the webpage, and I believe there is a contact us button or something like this, and then our communication team would organize this and further communicate.
Okay, very good. Thanks a lot. We have questions from the participants. The first one is the focus for Prefer is on patient preferences, but of course there are also other stakeholders. So what about physician preferences or maybe preferences of HTA bodies? So because I think sometimes I hear the critique that patients may not really understand certain risks or certain benefits because they lack the medical background to it. So is there anything on that as well?
Rachel, do you want to take that, or do you want me?
Sure. So, Connie, I'm not sure about the specific for Prefer, but clearly if we're making recommendations in the HTA space, I'm assuming we're going to perspectives or considering the perspectives beyond the patient. I can tell you my experience at Janssen is we often get this question about whether or not patients can take the survey, and the answer is with sufficient training and with simple attributes that don't have all of the clinical details that might not be necessary? Yes. However, there is an art to designing these surveys. I can clearly picture some that I wouldn't be able to take myself. So we do have to be mindful of how we do it. Now, in terms of the Janssen case, there are a lot of studies that were done prior to my joining that look at both the patient's perspective and the physician's, and they're not always the same. Physicians, for example, and this has been published, Bennett has published some with regard to atrial fibrillation and the risk of stroke and bleed. Physicians are more worried about death, and patients are more worried about disabling stroke, for example. And so we try to do preference studies where we can in the patient and the physician. And of course, this also aids in some of the shared decision-making and the individual patient discussions with the physician to recognize that preferences aren't always the same.
So in terms of that, one of the problems is that, you know, you will, if you have different variety of patient preferences or preferences coming from different stakeholders, and then you also have diversity within patient groups. So I think the case studies that you showed, there was something about that depending on some baseline characteristics, the preferences actually changed. So will we see maybe something more like a preference model where you can plug in different kind of preferences so you can see how they actually alter the decision? Is that some possibility?
I don't know necessarily of the methodology for a model that you would describe, but we are getting a lot of discussion, and again in my preference work, looking at heterogeneity. Of course there's preference heterogeneity, just like there is in the clinical data. There's the average patient, and then there's the individual. So there's a lot of work being done now in the field with things like latent class analysis, and in a paper that I hope to submit soon in Alzheimer's disease, we did have 3 distinct classes of preferences based on the latent class analysis. And just sort of to give you sort of an idea, there were some people who really cared about efficacy, and they'd take on all sorts of safety risks, but they really cared about efficacy. There was another group that was really worried about dementia, or I'm sorry, worried about side effects, and so they didn't want the medicine. They were worried about the side effects of the medicine. And then there was a group that would trade off benefits and risks. And so I do think that, and this is also in PREFER, there's going to be a push to try to understand how to tackle and measure heterogeneity of preferences. Connie, do you have anything to add? You might be on mute. Connie?
Yeah, no, I'm back. I'm sorry,
Okay.
I lost the connection again.
Okay. Do you have anything to add with regard to heterogeneity of preferences and how PREFER might be
yeah.
at that?
Yeah, actually the one I try now to add here is I agree with you, Alexander, that we can expect diversity of preferences within one stakeholder group, but probably also between the stakeholders. And I guess what we have done in the past is always considering the perspective of the one stakeholder, especially, I mean, who has driven the decision. And what we try to do with this project here is to widen the perspective in so far that we also learn and know what the patient preference is. And then I guess at the end, the decision will be driven by different perspectives. And what probably one of the goals of the project is also to identify and to find ways how we talk to each other, and how the different perspectives from the different stakeholders are considered for the decision making. So that is certainly, and whether this really results into a concrete methodology, that's probably still one question. But I guess we would also already gain from an agreement of, for instance, having scientific advisory meetings where the different stakeholders come together and discuss the different perspectives.
Okay, so you will also help to resolve differences between different stakeholders. So, for example, different approaches that the IMI might have in terms of the acceptance of the FDA or HTA bodies. So these are things you'll take into account as well.
What we especially intend to do first is to bring all the stakeholders together. First to find ways to really consider patient preferences and elicited it. Then things like remove maybe concerns on the regulatory or HTA body side that industry runs studies. If we allow industry to run these studies, what type of discussions and when could these discussions actually happen, and only then you will identify what are the differences. But at least also as part of the project should be recommendations when all these stakeholders should come together and discuss it.
Thanks. We have some questions about timelines and when we will see the first results that you already talked to, and what are the timelines for the planned case studies? Can you speak to that?
So the case studies will start in 2018. This year we will, by the end of the year, we really plan to publish first results from the work package 2, from the methods work package. And we hope, at the moment we are discussing really the very concrete timelines, because we want to make sure that the interviews have finished properly and all the methodological work has been done really in a proper way and finished before we just finish activities in a hurry. At the moment I anticipate to get this all finished by March next year, with already publishing certain results while we go through the year, and we have an annual meeting in October where we are really very keen to show already some results. And then, as I said, I think the first case studies will start next year, and then I think we have about 2.5 years for the case studies.
Okay. In terms of these case studies, do you see them kind of as standalone studies, such as online surveys or something like this, or do you foresee them to be packed on some clinical trials, for example?
That's one of the questions we will definitely discuss. And here I can just give you my own perspective at the moment. I think it will a bit depend on the type of the preference study. So just from my company, I can say we have done qualitative preference studies where it's really first of interest, what are the outcomes of importance, which have been online bulletin reviews or have been social media elicitation or discussions. The patient preference studies can certainly be a standalone study, but what we also aim for is to
Did we lose Connie?
I think so.
Okay. I'm not sure where she was going with that, so I cannot finish.
Okay.
I did see another comment in here. Go ahead.
Yeah. Maybe you can speak to the comment about the different perceptions of risk and how we speak about that. So is that something that you will go to? So for example, that people have a problem to distinguish between a 1% risk and a 0.1% risk, things like that.
I'm not sure how to answer that or how that will be looked at directly as part of Prefer. I know that right now a best practice that I'm familiar with is you show them the stick figures, like the choice task. Let me see if I can find it, because I think this one, I'm hitting escape here. Okay, let me show you the choice task, and hopefully this one has followed best practice. Oh, gotta go.
Yeah, that has the lots of people in it. Yeah.
Yes. So typically we try to show things 3 ways. You see the stick figures, then you see the 1%, and then you see the 10 out of 1,000. And so currently, according to the people that I've worked with in academia, one way you do it is this way. Now, to your question, people do look at a 1% chance of death differently than a 99% chance of survival. I'm not sure what the recommendations are on that and how to address that, but certainly there is a well-established difference there. But I can investigate further. I'm just not sure where that has netted out.
Yeah, I think that speaks to one of the other question is actually kind of one of the biggest challenges is to identify the attributes and the different levels of these. Yes. And when to do that, because I think especially when you do these studies very early in the development life cycle of a product, you may not know what is coming up later, and but if you find out about that after phase 3, you are in a very big time pressure to submit to regulators, and then you know what your attributes and your levels are, but you don't have the time to run the studies before submission. So I think that's I think one of the key problems, isn't it?
Well, there is a solution to that. So if you don't know the product, which is true, if you start early on, you might not know all of the attributes. You can, and I've seen this done here, is you can pick a nuisance side effect, say nausea. Nausea is in a lot of preference studies. So it's a nuisance, but it won't harm you in terms of being disabling or kill you. And then you pick something very disabling, like disabling stroke or death or something that's much more terrible in terms of utility. And then if you have a new side effect in your drug that because you don't know its profile, you anchor it between the ones that you've asked about. So that's been a case when I've done these early. You pick something mild, you pick something moderate, you pick something severe. You don't know that that's going to be associated with the drug because the profile hasn't been established, and then you use them as anchors. We're also currently discussing on one of my projects whether or not we want to repeat the preference study, because some things that have been known, we might want to know about those specifically versus anchoring them somewhere between nausea and death. Does that make sense? Okay. So you can anchor it.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and
I think we have Connie back. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I'm back. I'm really sorry. I don't know. I have probably some problems here with my telephone today. I guess also in the future we will have more preference studies describing what is important in the different disease areas for patients, and so I guess that will help also. So there's probably not always the need for every company to run a preference study, but that's also one of the questions we have to sort out, how we organize that in the future. And I think some companies have made experience also with building consortia and joining the have really a joint activity of running patient preference studies.
Yeah, I think that will be especially helpful in disease areas where there's lots of research going on, or kind of, there's maybe standardized treatments already on the market. For example, type 2 diabetes or certain things like this, where I think if there would be some kind of standard that people could refer to, that would make things much easier. I think that's what I see, for example, in the cost effectiveness model space. If there's certain well-established cost effectiveness models for certain diseases, then that helps a lot to use these and standardize these and get wide acceptance. Whereas if there is areas where there's previous little research, it's much harder to find to gain alignment on what's relevant. In terms of alignment, there's one other question here about how do you see that IMI prefer could contribute to an alignment in terms of regulators and especially the payers. And I see that we have both IMI and UNETA as key stakeholders, so I guess you will have lots of discussions between these different stakeholders at the project meetings, yeah.
So it looks as though Connie is having phone trouble. So we have brought as many people at the table as we can, and you see that the regulators are also there. So we are trying to make sure that we align all the initiatives that are there and make sure everyone has a voice. So there are going to be different guidances or different recommendations put out depending upon whether it's regulatory or HTA, but beyond that, I'm not sure how to answer the question. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. Well, we'll see how it will be very interesting to see how the different stakeholders, and there are lots of different stakeholders, how they converge to some guidelines.
Well, and there's going to be individual ones for each of those voices. So there's not just one, it's going to be a series of recommendations that come out, a series of documents.
A series of documents for
yeah.
different stakeholders, yeah?
Yes, because you could see how this would work, that I want a drug as a patient, but a regulatory body might not approve it, and an HTA body might not put it on the formulary. So, but nevertheless, we can take away recommendations for each of those. Connie, go ahead.
Yeah, right. It's still a bit under discussion whether we develop one document or maybe one document which has parts which are contains recommendations for all the stakeholders, and then specific parts for each of the stakeholders. I guess that's what we will really finally decide when we are at the stage of writing the recommendations. Maybe also important to know what we can do here is really only writing recommendations. So we could even not use the word guidance, because that's what regulators and HTA bodies would need to put in place. But we are certainly really very much interested in this very close relationship and collaboration, so that regulators actually accept our recommendations and turn this into their guidances, and same for HTA bodies.
Thanks a lot. We are nearly on the top of the hour, and I would make a big thank you to both of you presenting here and answering all these different topics. I hope we can have you again on such a webinar when we have more results, especially next year. In terms of all the audience, many of you probably have already joined the email list of the www.benefitriskassessment.com email distribution list. Over that you will get further updates on such webinars as well as other information. Please also share these things via social media so that more people get aware about these important projects. And finally, I just thought that about the example case that you brought about the obesity benefit risk example case, there's actually a podcast by Richard Zink from the ASA Biopharm section who interviewed the authors of that. And that is very interesting for further listening. So nice listening for commute or something else. And with that, I would like to thank again the presenters and wish you all a very good time. We will put the recording on the web page very soon, and then you can also distribute that to others who couldn't join today. Thanks a lot.
Thanks also, Alexander.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.